It was Christmas, and the snow was falling like it was straight out of a Hallmark movie soft, quiet, the kind of snow that should fill you with peace. Outside, everything looked perfect. Inside, though, not so much. I'm Jason, 29, and I was sitting at the family dinner table, but it felt like I was suffocating in the warmth. My family wasn't the cozy, perfect picture I had hoped for. The smell of roast turkey and pumpkin pie should have been comforting, but all it did was remind me how out of place I felt. I've always been the black sheep of the family, but lately, it had been worse. Sure, every family has its roles, but somehow, in my family, it felt like they had forgotten I even existed. Over the last few months, I couldn't do anything right. The more I tried, the more I felt like a stranger in my own home. It wasn't that I was perfect. I wasn't, but this wasn't about that. It was about them, the way they treated me like I didn't matter. I didn't ask for much, just a little respect. But instead, it was like every attempt to reach out made me more invisible. And then there was Kyle. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. The guy who showed up at every family event, always with a smile, always saying the right thing, always winning over our parents. They adored him, and I hated it. I hated the way he could walk into the room and instantly be the center of attention, like he was some kind of hero. While I couldn't even get a decent hello. For years, I'd tried to keep the peace, tried to be civil with him, but it felt like the distance between us was growing every day. Christmas dinner was supposed to be different. I told myself that this time, I would just let it go, that I wouldn't let their coldness get to me. But the moment I stepped through that door, I could tell it wasn't going to be like every other year. Mom was in the kitchen, as always, but she didn't even look up when I greeted her. Dad was sitting in his usual chair, buried in the paper, giving me nothing more than a brief nod. It was like I wasn't even there. And Kyle? That smug grin on his face was enough to make me want to punch him. It was like he was just waiting for me to mess up. After dinner, we sat around the table, and the usual chatter started. I tried to ignore the awkwardness, tried to blend in. But then Kyle, in that too sweet voice of his, decided it was time to stir the pot. "Hey, Jason," he said, leaning back in his chair with that look on his face, the one that made me want to strangle him. "We had a vote." I raised an eyebrow. "A vote? What are you talking about?" Kyle looked around the table like he was some kind of leader, waiting for everyone to hang on his every word. "Well, you weren't here last week," he said, dragging it out. "So we had a family vote." "About you." My stomach dropped. "What vote?" "We voted," Kyle continued, and I could hear the glee in his voice. "And you're no longer part of the family." The words hit me like a slap in the face. I didn't even have time to process what he was saying. It didn't make sense. They couldn't possibly have voted me out, could they? I looked around. My mom, my dad, everyone was staring at me, avoiding my eyes like they were too ashamed to face me. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I didn't even know what to say. I wanted to yell, to scream, but nothing came out. I just stood there, frozen. Then, as if he wasn't satisfied with just throwing the bomb, Kyle kept going. "We voted, Jason. It was unanimous. You're just not part of the family anymore." The worst part? Everyone laughed. My parents chuckled along with it, as if this was all some sick joke. But the look in their eyes told me it wasn't. They had actually made this decision, and they were fine with it. It wasn't a joke. I felt my heart sink. I wanted to leave, but something inside me just froze. I barely whispered, "Well, that's nice," and nodded, my voice barely a breath. I didn't know what else to do. But I couldn't take it anymore. The tension was suffocating. Kyle's grin didn't falter. And my parents, well, they just nodded along like it was all perfectly normal. I stood up. "Jason?" Mom's voice shook, unsure whether this was a joke, but I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I walked away from the table, from the faces of people I used to call family. I could feel their eyes burning into my back, but I didn't turn around. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my coat, barely able to focus. Kyle called after me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The cold air hit me like a wall when I stepped outside, the snow stinging my skin. I stood there, breathing in the icy air, trying to process what had just happened. It felt unreal. How did it come to this? My dad's voice called from inside, but I couldn't bring myself to care. "Jason," he said, "you're really going to leave?" I paused, fingers still on the doorknob, my body tense. I turned, looked over my shoulder, and said, "You voted, didn't you?" "Well, I'm just honoring the vote." With that, I stepped out into the night, leaving everything behind. The door slammed shut behind me, but I didn't look back. Not this time. I walked away from that house in a daze. The snow felt like it was swallowing me whole, the cold biting through my clothes. But I didn't care. I had just been disowned, voted out like I was some kind of nuisance, and I was too numb to process it all. For the next few days, I floated through life like I was in a dream, numb and detached from everything. My phone buzzed with messages my parents, friends, even some extended family who somehow found out about the whole situation, but I ignored them. They could apologize, explain, whatever. It didn't matter. Nothing was going to change. The damage had been done. The anger, though, that never left. It simmered beneath the surface, waiting to boil over. I was pissed, no doubt about it. But what stung the most was the realization that this wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't just a holiday spat. It was years of neglect, of being overlooked, of being the one who was always treated like I didn't matter. My whole life, I'd been pushed aside, told to get in line and stop making waves. But this was a bridge too far. I was done. Tyler, my best friend, was the one who kept me grounded in those first few days. He was always the voice of reason, the guy who didn't let me wallow in self-pity for too long. "Man, you can't just let them get away with this," he said one night when we were sitting on his couch, the TV muted. The only sound between us, the clinking of beer bottles. I stared at him, shaking my head. "What do you mean? I've already been ignored. What else is there to do?" Tyler leaned forward, his expression serious. "You don't let them think they can treat you like that without consequences. You're better than this, but you have to do it right. If you just go in guns blazing, you're giving them exactly what they want. They want to see you angry. Don't give them that satisfaction." It stung, hearing him say it out loud, but I knew he was right. I couldn't just storm in and shout at them. I couldn't play into their narrative of me being the problem. No, if I was going to do something about this, it had to be calculated. It had to be smart. And most importantly, it had to make them feel the weight of their actions. Over the next few weeks, I laid out my plan. I didn't need to burn the whole thing to the ground, not yet. But I would make them realize what they had done, what they had lost. The first step was easy. I stopped reaching out. No more texts, no more calls, no more trying to prove I mattered. I wanted them to feel my absence. I wanted them to feel like they had lost something. So when the calls came in from Mom and Dad, I let them ring out. When Kyle sent his usual sarcastic messages, I ignored them, letting that feeling of rejection sink into them the way it had sunk into me for years. But I didn't just go silent. I started building something new. I reached out to the people who had always had my back. Friends like Tyler, of course, but also some distant relatives who'd always treated me like family. People who didn't care about the drama. We started getting together more dinners, game nights, the kind of things I used to wish my family would do, but never did. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was where I belonged. I posted pictures on social media, nothing flashy, just simple snapshots of me laughing with friends, enjoying life without the constant tension of my family's judgment hanging over me. It wasn't a message at first, not one anyone outside of my family would get. But for them, oh, they got the point. I wanted them to know I was fine without them. I wanted them to see that I could live without their approval. It was about a month later when the first text came through from my parents. A simple message, "We want to talk. Family meeting tomorrow. Please come." It was a message I had expected but didn't want to deal with. I didn't even hesitate. I hit decline and moved on. If they thought I was just going to waltz back in, they were sorely mistaken. The next day, Kyle tried calling me. I didn't pick up. Instead, I let it ring and watched his name flash on the screen. After a few missed calls, he sent a text. "We need to talk. You're being childish." I didn't laugh, but I wanted to. If only he knew what I was really up to. Instead of responding, I just typed back, "I'm busy." It was the first time in years I had felt like I was in control. For once, I wasn't reacting to their manipulation. They were reacting to me. Then, the ultimate moment arrived. A week after that, Kyle posted a picture on social media. It was of the whole family at a dinner: Mom, Dad, Kyle, everyone. They were all sitting together, smiling for the camera. It was the kind of photo that looked perfect at first glance. But I could see it, the tension, the smiles that didn't reach their eyes. I stared at the picture for a long time, letting that sense of calm wash over me. They were trying to play the happy family card like nothing had changed. But I knew better. They had already made their move. Now, it was time for me to make mine. It was a weird feeling, watching my family from the sidelines. The first couple of weeks after I walked away, I felt the absence, sure, but I also felt this strange sense of relief. It was like I'd finally stepped out of the suffocating pressure they'd put on me for years. The constant tension, the guilt trips, the way they made me feel like I was always one mistake away from being cast aside, it was all gone. But there was something deeper, something more unsettling beneath the calm. I could feel them trying to pull me back. It wasn't obvious at first. It started small texts from my mom. Are you sure about this? We miss you. And then there were the calls, the awkward, I just want to check in on you from dad. At first, it was just a little annoying, like they couldn't understand what had gone wrong. But as the days passed, their attempts at reconciliation started to feel more calculated. Like they knew the damage was done, but they wanted to clean it up, to cover it up. I wasn't stupid. I could see through it all. They weren't sorry for what they'd done. They were sorry they were losing control. Kyle's behavior didn't change either. Every so often, I'd get a text or a call from him, usually with some sarcastic jab, as if I'd forgotten all the little ways he tried to make me feel like crap for the past decade. You're still mad about the vote? He'd text, with his signature smirk on the other side of the screen. It was just a joke, bro. Relax. But that smirk, that look he gave me when he said things like that, it infuriated me. I'd never admit it to him, but those moments, those subtle little digs, had always hurt. The way he would act like he had it all figured out while I struggled just to be seen. But I wasn't the same guy anymore. I wasn't going to let his games get to me. Not anymore. It was time to get serious. They thought I was some kind of joke, didn't they? They thought they could vote me out and I'd just crawl back like I always did. Well, they were wrong. This time, I was going to make sure they understood what they had done, and I was going to do it on my terms. The first step was easy. I stopped replying to their attempts to get in touch. I knew they were waiting for me to break, for me to give in and call them, but I didn't. The more I ignored them, the more desperate their messages became. My mom would text, "Please talk to me," every other day, and Dad? Well, his attempts were more passive-aggressive. He'd leave voicemails, "Jason, we need to talk about the family situation. This can't go on." I could feel the pressure building, but I held firm. There was something so satisfying about hearing those messages and knowing I had the power now. They weren't the ones deciding if we were going to talk. I was. For once, the tables were turned. Tyler, of course, was my rock through all of this. He was the one person who never left my side. He didn't try to tell me what to do or make me feel like I had to forgive my family just because they were family. No, he let me vent, gave me a place to let out the anger without judgment. But at the same time, he kept pushing me to keep my head cool. "Don't just go in there screaming," he'd say. "That's what they want. You want them to regret this, right? You want them to know they can't treat you like crap anymore." He was right. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose my temper. They wanted to see me fall apart. But I wasn't going to play that game. I had something better in mind. So, I started planning. I didn't want to burn bridges. Not yet. I had a long-term plan, and it required patience. But patience wasn't something I was known for. I knew that the moment I showed up at their door or answered a call, I'd be right back where I started, manipulated, ignored, dismissed. I needed to hit them where it hurt, without giving them the chance to talk their way out of it. I started getting my life together. I'd always put everyone else first, my family, their needs, their opinions. But now it was my time. I focused on work, on my health, on the things that made me happy. For the first time in ages, I felt like I was actually living for myself. I knew the time would come when they would try to get me back. They'd invite me to family events, send gifts, pretend like nothing had happened. But I was ready. I was ready for the day they would try to act like they hadn't just kicked me out, like they hadn't publicly disowned me. And sure enough, a few weeks later, I got a message from Mom. It was just another attempt to get me to come back for a family gathering. The message read, "We want you to be here, Jason. It's Christmas soon, and we can't imagine it without you. Please, let's put all this behind us." I stared at it for a long time before I replied, "I don't think we can just put this behind us." Not yet. That was when I knew. I wasn't just being stubborn. I wasn't just holding a grudge. This was about respect. This was about making them realize that I wasn't a puppet, someone they could discard and call back when it was convenient. No, this time I was going to make them sweat. I was going to make them realize what they had done to me. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The real test would be coming soon. They would be forced to face the consequences of their actions. I had a plan, and it was only a matter of time before I executed it. The weeks after that message from my mom felt like a slow buildup to something big. I could sense my family was getting more desperate, more frantic with their attempts to reel me back in. But every time I saw another message or heard another voicemail, I felt less and less inclined to respond. The silence was powerful. For the first time, I was no longer the one chasing them for approval. They were chasing me, and they didn't even realize it yet. But I knew it wouldn't be long before they tried something more drastic. They would have to. It was only a matter of time before they grew tired of playing nice. And sure enough, it came when I least expected it. One evening, just as I was getting ready to head out for drinks with Tyler, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Dad. I almost didn't want to open it, but I did. "Jason," it read, "we've tried everything. You need to come home. This isn't you." I stared at the words for a while, unsure how to feel. Part of me wanted to laugh, "This isn't me." That's what they had to say after everything they'd put me through. They were the ones who had turned me into this version of myself, the one who couldn't trust anyone in the family anymore. But another part of me felt something else, something raw and painful. I couldn't even finish reading the message before my mind went back to that moment at Christmas dinner. That smug grin from Kyle, the way my parents had just nodded along like it was no big deal. It was as if I didn't matter enough for them to even put up a fight. They had voted me out like I was some disposable member of the family, like I had no real value to them. No, I couldn't go back. Not yet. Instead of replying to Dad's message, I closed my phone and put it in my pocket. I wasn't ready to deal with it, not like this. Not on their terms. Tyler had been watching the whole thing unfold from the sidelines. He'd seen how much I'd pulled away, how focused I'd become on myself and my new life. "You've got to do it on your terms," he kept telling me. "Don't let them control the narrative. You decide when you're ready to move forward." His words stuck with me, even when the messages from my family kept coming. They were desperate now, and I could see it. They didn't want me to break away for good, but I had to make them understand that I wasn't coming back to their toxic dynamic. I had to make them feel the weight of their decision. So I started working on the next phase of my plan. I wasn't going to give them what they wanted, a quick apology and an easy reunion. No, they had crossed a line and they had to pay for it. The moment they thought they had all the power, I was going to show them how wrong they were. It started small, but it was calculated. I knew I had to strike where it would hurt the most, where they would never expect it. I started reaching out to old friends, people I had lost touch with over the years, people who knew the real me. I wanted to build a network of support, something that was just for me. For once, I wasn't doing it for them, for my parents, or for anyone else. I was doing it for myself. One of those old friends, Mark, was someone I hadn't seen in years. He used to be tight with Kyle, but we had always gotten along well. After everything had gone down, I decided to reach out to him. I wasn't sure what he would think of my situation, but when he replied, his message was simple: "I always knew there was more to you than what they saw. You're better off without them." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had never really known where I stood with my friends during all this family chaos, but Mark's reply was like a validation. It was a reminder that there were still people who saw me for who I truly was, not the version my family had manipulated me into becoming. The more I spent time with these old friends, the more I realized how far I had come. I was no longer waiting for approval. I was making my own way, and it felt good. For the first time in years, I could finally breathe. I didn't have to be anyone's scapegoat. I didn't have to pretend I was okay with being treated like an afterthought. But I knew the storm wasn't over yet. They were going to escalate things. I could feel it. They didn't just want me back in the fold, they needed me back. I was the missing piece in their perfect family portrait, and without me, the cracks were starting to show. A few days later, I received another message, But this time, it was different. It was from Kyle. "I can't believe you're doing this. You've gone too far, Jason. Mom and Dad want you back. This isn't how we were raised." That message was a trigger. I could already hear his voice in my head, dripping with condescension. He always acted like he knew everything, like he had all the answers. But what he didn't know was that I had already started moving on. He wasn't going to be the one to define who I was anymore. I was the one in control now, and I wasn't going to let him, or anyone else, take that away from me. I didn't respond to Kyle's message either. Instead, I did something that felt like a weight had been lifted from my chest. I booked a flight to the city I had always dreamed of moving to. I hadn't told anyone. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of knowing I was leaving. I wasn't going to give them the chance to try to stop me, to make me feel guilty. The flight was scheduled for the next day, and I didn't look back. The next morning, I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and stepped out into the world. The cold air hit me like a slap in the face, but it was exactly what I needed. I didn't know where this journey would take me, but I knew one thing for sure: I was finally free. The flight to the city was the best decision I'd made in a long time. The moment I stepped onto that plane, I felt this weight lift off my chest. I wasn't running away. I wasn't avoiding anything. I was just moving forward. The city was everything I'd imagined it to be. Bright lights, new people, endless opportunities. It wasn't just a change of scenery. It was freedom. I hadn't planned on cutting off my family completely, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized how toxic they'd become. The past few months, the Christmas dinner, all those years of being ignored and mistreated, it was all clear to me now. I'd spent so much time trying to make things work, trying to fit into their mold. But every time I gave an inch, they took a mile. They didn't care about me. They cared about their perfect little family image, and I was just the inconvenient piece that didn't fit. The apartment I found in the city was small, but it was mine. The freedom I felt in those first few days was intoxicating. I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, without looking over my shoulder. I didn't have to second-guess my every move. I didn't have to worry about making my family happy or meeting their expectations. I was finally in control of my own life. Tyler had been there for me through it all, even from miles away. He checked in regularly, and I'm pretty sure he was the only one who knew how much of a struggle it had been to let go of my family. He'd always been the one to remind me to stay focused, to keep moving forward. "You're doing the right thing, man," he'd say. "You're better off. You've got a life to live." I still thought about them. I won't lie. Every now and then, I'd wonder how they were, what they were doing. But it was always followed by the reminder that I didn't owe them anything anymore. They didn't get to dictate my life. I didn't have to answer to them. The calls eventually stopped. Not that I cared. My phone would buzz now and then, but each time I checked, it was just more of the same mom trying to patch things up, Dad asking for a family meeting. I couldn't help but laugh when I saw one of Kyle's messages pop up. "I don't know how long you plan on ignoring us, but you can't keep running forever." I didn't respond to him. Not even once. I was done. Then, about 3 weeks into my new life in the city, something unexpected happened. I got a message from my mom. This time, it wasn't a plea for reconciliation. It wasn't an apology or an invitation to a family gathering. It was something different, something I wasn't expecting. "Jason," the message started, "I know we've messed up. We've hurt you, and I don't know if I can make up for that. But I need you to know, this family isn't the same without you. Kyle. He's not the person you think he is." I stared at the screen for a while, unsure what to make of it. After everything that had happened, after the vote, the jokes, the treatment, I couldn't just forget it all because of one message. But something about the words caught me off guard. Was this a real apology, or was it just another attempt to manipulate me? I couldn't tell. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I let it sit. I had no intention of rushing back into the mess. Not yet. But it made me think, for the first time, that maybe they did realize the consequences of their actions. Maybe they did feel the weight of what they'd done, but I wasn't going to let it affect my decision. Not yet. That night, I went out with Tyler. We grabbed drinks at a local bar, the kind of place where the music was loud, the people were friendly, and no one cared what you did the day before. We were talking about everything and nothing at all, just the way we always did when we needed to blow off steam. Out of nowhere, Tyler asked, "So, have you heard from them?" I looked at him, unsure how to answer. "Yeah, a couple of times. They want me to come back. They want to fix things. He didn't say anything for a while, just let the words hang in the air. And what do you want? He asked, finally. I paused. I don't know. Part of me wants to just say, screw it and move on. But it's hard. I spent so long trying to make things work. And now it feels like I'm the one who's broken. Tyler leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly. Listen, man, you're not broken. You're not the one who messed up. They did. You've got nothing to prove. You've spent your whole life trying to get their approval. But at the end of the day, their opinion doesn't matter unless you let it. I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words sink in. I know. I just wish it didn't hurt so much. You're better off, he said simply. They hurt you. They pushed you to the edge. But you don't have to keep playing their game. It wasn't easy. It wasn't like a light switch that I could just flip and forget about them. But sitting there with Tyler, talking it through, I felt something shift. I wasn't just running away from my family anymore. I was running toward a life where I wasn't tied to their expectations, where I wasn't just the screw-up they could push around. I didn't check my phone when I got back to my apartment that night. I didn't care about the messages waiting for me. I didn't care if they were finally realizing how badly they had treated me. The next day, I woke up to another message from my mom. It was longer than the last one, but it still wasn't the apology I had been waiting for. Jason, we've made a mess of everything, and I get that you're angry, but I need you to know this. You were never the problem. You were always the one who tried, always the one who gave, and I'm sorry we never saw that. Please, come home. I didn't respond right away, but I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going back. Not now, not ever. It wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't even about the hurt. It was about choosing myself. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let their expectations define me. I had my own life now, my own future, and I was going to live it. Time passed slowly but steadily, like a river that doesn't rush but keeps flowing. It wasn't until a couple of months later that I truly realized how much I had changed. The silence between me and my family had become deafening, but in that silence, I found something I had never known before: peace. The constant noise of their expectations, their judgments, the weight of their unspoken criticisms, it was all gone. I had done it. I had finally walked away, not because I was running from them, but because I was running toward my own life. The city had become my sanctuary. It wasn't perfect. There were days when loneliness crept in, when I'd missed the comfort of familiar places or faces. But those moments were fleeting. I was building something better, something real. I had friends who valued me for who I was, not for the role I played in a family drama. I had a job I enjoyed, a small but cozy apartment, and a sense of self-worth I hadn't felt in years. But then the call came. It was the first time I'd heard from my mom in weeks. She didn't even give me time to think. The words tumbled out of her mouth in a rush, and I could tell right away that something was different. Jason, I don't know what to do. Kyle's making things worse. Your dad's really sick. You need to come home. I froze. What do you mean, Dad's sick? The panic in her voice was unmistakable. He's been hiding it, Jason. He's been having trouble with his heart, and it's getting worse. He won't go to the doctor, and now he's in the hospital. You need to come home. I don't know what to do without you. I sat there, staring at the phone in my hand. 1,000 thoughts rushed through my head. Part of me wanted to drop everything and rush back home. After all, it was my dad. But the other part of me, the part that had learned to survive without them, held me back. I had walked away for a reason. I had chosen myself, my own future over the suffocating grip of their control. Was I really going to let this tear me apart again? Before I could answer, my mom's voice cracked, and I heard her start to sob. I'm sorry, Jason. I know I've been awful, but please come back. We need you. I sat in silence, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. The guilt that had been buried deep inside me for so long started to surface. But then I reminded myself this wasn't my responsibility anymore. Not after everything they'd put me through. I had given them more chances than I could count, and every time, they had let me down. I took a deep breath and answered, I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't. Not like this. You all made your decision. You voted me out, remember? There was a pause on the other end of the line. My mom didn't say anything at first. The silence stretched on, and I could almost hear her thoughts racing. "I know," she finally whispered. "I know what we did, and I'm sorry. But I'm asking you, Jason, please, just come home for Dad." Her words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to go back and make everything better, to be the son they wanted me to be, to fill the empty space they had left for me. But I knew better now. I knew that this wasn't about Dad. This wasn't even about me. It was about them, about the way they had always turned to me when it was convenient for them and discarded me when it wasn't. "I can't," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I'm not the person you think I am anymore, Mom. I'm sorry, but I have my life here now. And I'm not going to let you pull me back into the same mess." There was another long pause before she spoke again. "I understand, Jason. I really do. I just wanted you to know you're not alone. You never were." And then, as quickly as it had come, the call ended. My heart was pounding in my chest, and for a moment, I felt like I was caught between two worlds. The world I had walked away from, the world that had shaped me, for better or worse, and the one I was building, one day at a time, on my own terms. I sat there in my apartment, holding the phone, and stared out the window. The city outside was still, the night lights twinkling in the distance, and for the first time, I realized something. I had finally stopped looking back. The months of anger, hurt, and resentment had faded, leaving only the cold truth: I wasn't going to go back. My family had made their choice, and I had made mine. The hurt that had built up for years had slowly been replaced by something else, something more empowering. I was free, but it didn't mean it was easy. There were still days when I missed them, when I wished I had the kind of family that didn't break apart at the first sign of trouble. But I knew something now that I hadn't known before. I didn't need them to be whole. I had everything I needed right here, in this city, in this life I had chosen for myself. A few days later, Kyle tried to reach me again. This time, his message was more direct. "I don't know what's going on with you, but you can't just pretend we're all dead to you. Dad's dying, and you're out here doing God knows what. Get your shit together, Jason." I didn't even think twice before I hit block. I wasn't angry anymore, not really. I was just done. A week after the call from my mom, I finally felt it. That final sense of closure. I didn't need to go back to the old house, to the place where they'd made me feel like I wasn't enough. I didn't need to be the son they wanted or expected me to be. I was enough as I was, without their approval, without their votes. The phone didn't buzz with family texts anymore. The silence wasn't deafening now. It was peaceful. I had finally made my peace with them, and more importantly, with myself. I knew my dad's condition wasn't going to magically improve. I knew my family was falling apart, but I was done being the scapegoat, the fixer. I had done my part, and now, for the first time in my life, I was truly free. Story 2, I never imagined that I would be the kind of person who'd be petty. However, in light of all that has transpired, I believe I am somewhat justified. Let me tell you how my family chose to keep me out of my brother's engagement celebration, and how, just to make them cringe, I ended up purchasing the dream home they had been coveting for years. I'm Claire, and I'm 28 years old. I don't say much, don't ask for much, and keep to yourself. I'm financially secure since I work as a marketing manager at a respectable business. Nor wealthy, nor impoverished, simply getting by. Drama has never been my thing, but this time, let me tell you, it came to me. If you know anything about middle children, you know that we are often the ones that get forgotten. I am one of them. The golden kid has always been my elder brother, Ryan. He is athletic, attractive, and, for want of a better description, the family's favorite. Lily, my younger sister. She's adorable, kind, and appears to be everyone's little sweetheart. Me? I have always been kind of an afterthought. I didn't mind. Being the focus of attention was not something I ever anticipated. But when you realize that's all your parents are seeing of you, it might hurt occasionally. A person who is only kind of there. After Ryan got engaged, everything started to go south. I must admit that at first I was pleased for him. It's wonderful that he found someone he loved, isn't it? Except, and I ought to have anticipated this, the entire situation swiftly evolved into a chance for my parents to highlight their son's achievements. The first significant warning sign was the engagement party. Sarah, Ryan's fiance, is kind but not very focused on starting a family. For some reason, everyone but me is quite okay with her not really connecting with any of us. I wasn't even invited to the engagement party, which didn't help either. Not even a casual one. Hey, if you're free, come. Something like that. The more I considered it, the more absurd it seemed to me. I brought it up to my mother. How come I wasn't invited? I mean, I'm his sister. Trying to speak with a level voice, I said. She looked at me like that. Only a mother can be that compassionate. We just decided it would be best if you skipped this one, darling. It's all about Ryan and Sarah, you know. We don't want you to feel under any strain. Startled, I blinked. What kind of pressure? It's only a family gathering. After that, she didn't really say anything. Basically dismissed it. But that was all. The justification. It was more than that, too. After the engagement, it seemed as though Ryan's needs came before whatever I said or did. My parents probably didn't even remember that I was here. I tried to be the good daughter all my life. I stood by their choices, remained silent when I was offended, and was there for them whenever they needed me. However, something exploded inside of me following that engagement party. I would no longer be the invisible one. Being treated like an afterthought was not fair to me. And perhaps it was time for me to take care of myself if they were going to treat me that way. After a few months, Ryan and Sarah began discussing the possibility of purchasing a home. For years, they had their eye on this stunning suburban colonial with 4 bedrooms. Everything they want was there. It was the home of their dreams. I could tell they were serious about making an offer since I had heard them discuss it several times. However, there was just one issue. They were not yet able to afford it. Not with their existing employment, college loans, and mounting wedding costs. They weren't giving up on the house, even if it was barely out of their grasp. And I was able to help with it. I didn't make this decision lightly, but I reasoned that it was the right thing to do in view of all that had transpired. I had accumulated a respectable sum of money over the years. The house was within my means. No one else had yet to make an offer, and it was within my price range. I'll confess that what I did was petty. I proceeded to purchase the house. Yes, it was the identical home that Ryan and Sarah had discussed for years. The thrill I had when I signed the documents is beyond words. The home wasn't the only issue. For once, it was about obtaining what they had been unable to have. I felt as though I was acting more for myself than for them. I'm not lying. There was a part of me that was spiteful. However, there was another aspect of me that was truly thrilled. I could already see myself relocating, furnishing the room as I saw fit, and leading a life free from the continual sense of being in the shadow of others. My family's response? That's when everything really began to go south. My folks contacted me shortly after the house closed. My mother was the first. "What's going on, Claire?" she inquired. She spoke in a strained tone. "I recently learned that you purchased the home. Sarah and Ryan were examining it. Why would you do that?" I maintained my composure, but I could sense the delight growing within. I could afford to buy the house. I just responded, "I want it, and I like it." The person on the other end of the line paused for a while. "But that's their dream home," my mother said. "They have discussed it extensively, as you are aware. How come you would take that away from them?" I made an effort not to get guilt-tripped by her. Nothing was taken by me. I was the first to arrive at a free market. They ought to have taken action sooner. That response didn't sit well with her. "Claire, this is absurd. You're already troublesome enough. They're inconsolable." Ryan gave me a call a few days later. To be honest, I anticipated him to be angry. However, the intensity of hatred in his voice surprised me. "What's wrong with you, Claire?" he shouted. "We were intended to live in that house. Why would you purchase it? Are you attempting to wreck our entire situation? You are aware of our desire for it." Even though I could feel my fury building, I spoke in a level tone. "Ryan, it's just a home. I haven't taken your firstborn child or anything. If you desired it, you need to have taken action sooner." He persisted in questioning why I was being so unkind and why, for once, I was denying him something. Additionally, it was the first time in my life I didn't give up. No matter how much it upset them, I wasn't going to say I was sorry for doing what was best for me. They are now threatening to destroy my phone and demanding that I return it to them. I'm also under pressure from my folks. They are accusing me of being self-centered and claiming that I am destroying the family. It's draining. However, I'm not sure what they're expecting me to do. Now it's my home. I earned it via hard effort. I've lost any sense of how to feel. I have my ideal house, on the one hand. However, I hardly hear from my family anymore, and I'm beginning to feel the effects of the guilt. I'm not going to back down, though, not now. The calls continued to come in. I initially disregarded them and let the alerts to accumulate. I didn't want to talk to Ryan or my parents, not after everything they had said, but I was being tormented by guilt. Even though I felt in my heart that I had made the right choice for me, the incessant reminders from them made it difficult to feel good about it. After a week, I could see that they were making more of an effort. Voicemail after voicemail was left by my mother. More desperate than the others. Please, Claire, you're not understanding. In one of them, she begged. Ryan is devastated. We're a family. We are being torn apart by this. Is it not possible to simply sell it back to them? Please, simply consider it. It's the proper course of action. My heart twisted as I sat there, phone in hand, listening to her voice shatter, and for a brief minute, I nearly gave in. I nearly gave it some thought. Perhaps I was being too severe. Perhaps I could sell the house back, make amends with them, and things would return to normal. Then I thought of the engagement celebration. I recalled how they had disregarded me and how Ryan had pretended that I was unimportant. Furthermore, I couldn't get rid of the impression that they were only angry now because they had been let down. I then let it go to voicemail once more. The real kicker, however, came next. Ryan arrived at my house. To be honest, I wasn't expecting him. I had no idea how he knew where I had gone. I had just finished my coffee in the early hours of a Saturday morning when I heard a knock. He was standing on my doorstep when I opened the door. He appeared to be prepared for battle with his arms crossed. "We need to talk, Claire," he said in a tight voice. I inhaled deeply. It was this. I had been avoiding the confrontation for weeks. I gave him a nod and moved out of his way. This is not something I want to do over the phone. Ryan started pacing back and forth in my living room. "You're being crazy, and I don't understand why you're doing this to us. To me, to our family." I folded my arms, attempting to keep cool. "I didn't do anything to you. I just made a choice for myself. I didn't steal anything. If anything, you should have done sooner." His cheeks flushed with fury. "It's not about acting sooner, Claire. It's about family. You're being so self-centered. And I don't understand why you're punishing me like Wei." I wasn't sure why, but hearing him talk about family like Wei touched a chord. Even though my voice wavered a bit, I was unable to show him that I was feeling his influence. "Ryan, you don't understand. I've always supported you, played the nice sister all the time. The silent but encouraging one. For once, though, I'm selecting myself this time. I'm prioritizing myself. I was left out of your engagement, didn't even invite me to attend. However, do you think I'll just hand you what I've earned?" He paused his pacing and looked at me, his features briefly softening. "The house isn't the point. Claire, it's about us. My sister is you. Even though you seem to be making an extra effort to harm me, I still adore you." I exhaled. "I'm sick of continually taking a step back so you can go forward, Ryan. And I don't mean to harm you. That's plenty for me." A protracted hush ensued. Ryan's expression was a mix of shock and pain. He shook his head and said, "I don't know who you are anymore." Anything to help him comprehend was what I wanted to say. In actuality, though, I wasn't sure whether I could justify myself. I was no longer even sure whether I was making the correct decision. The thought of losing my family over something like this was terrible, and the strain was beginning to get to me. Then I remembered how they had treated me throughout the years. The home wasn't the only issue here. It was about finally defending myself and refusing to allow them put me in a difficult situation. Ryan broke the quiet at last. "You would return it if you truly cared about me." I was taken aback. He seemed to be talking in absolutes, as if giving away what was rightfully mine was the only way I could express my love for him. "Ryan, that's unfair. That is not for you to determine. I made this choice. Furthermore, you wouldn't ask me to reverse everything because it's inconvenient for you if you truly cared about me." His eyes narrowed as he stared at me for a long time. I didn't see anger in them. It was terrible. Disappointment. He remarked in a hushed voice. "I guess I was wrong about you. I believed you to be superior to this." He then slammed the door behind him and ran out. For a few while, I remained still, the weight of his words crushing me. Was I truly making a mistake? I didn't think it would go this far. For once, I only wanted something for me. The quiet in my flat sounded deafening today, though. The home that had seemed like a fantasy was now a burden. Was I mistaken? Was I the antagonist in this tale? I just wanted to be there for me. I had nothing to say. I just had the depressing impression that nothing will ever be the same again. Once more, the phone rang. My mother was phoning from a new number this time. I knew who it was, but I didn't recognize the number. For a long time, I gazed at the screen, wondering if I was prepared for whatever was ahead. I wasn't either. Not quite yet. However, I couldn't stay away from it forever. The days that followed were a roller coaster of emotions. I continued to receive texts from my relatives. They simply continued to accumulate. Ryan had also phoned a few times, and my mom was unyielding. I was acting strangely when my dad joined in on the texting, stating that he didn't understand what was happening. However, one message in particular caught my attention. It was the one that truly broke me, and it came from my mother. Claire, we are related. It is expected of us to support one another. I know you're upset, but this is only a house. Losing us is not worth it. Before it's too late, please feel your mistake. That one sentence kept replaying in my head as I looked at it for a long time. It's only a home. That could be the case. Perhaps it's just a home, I thought, but it was so much more than that for me. It served as a symbol, a reminder of the years I was ignored and treated as though I didn't exist. No one in my family had ever inquired about my feelings or what I desired. It was always about Ryan's accomplishments, my parents' standards, and their ideal life. They didn't think of me, not until I made a choice that didn't align with their ideal scenario. And the more I gave it some thought, the more I understood that I was fighting for more than just a house. I was battling for my own independence and visibility, my freedom to make my own decisions without feeling bad about it. However, I was still plagued by guilt. With each dispute and conflict, I couldn't help but feel like a part of myself was vanishing. I was accustomed to maintaining the family's unity and acting as the mediator. Now, though, I felt as though I was dissecting myself in order to prove a point. And despite my assurances that I was acting morally, I couldn't get rid of the sensation that I was gradually losing them all. Everything didn't get out of hand until the following weekend. I had avoided my family all week long, not returning their calls or messages. I told myself that all I needed was room to breathe and think. It wasn't until the night before that I realized how much I was dreading the family get-together. It had been a while since I had attended one. The last time was when Ryan announced his engagement at a holiday dinner a few months ago. Naturally, my mother had insisted that I assist with the planning to ensure that Ryan and his fiancée had the best possible experience. However, things felt different this time. In my heart, I wasn't sure I was prepared to face them, but I knew they would confront me once more. I couldn't hide forever, though. That Sunday, I entered my parents' house, where the family usually congregates. The typical hum of laughter and conversation filled the room. The aroma of freshly made cookies fills the air. However, the atmosphere changed as soon as I walked in. My parents were whispering to one another in the kitchen. Sitting at the dining table was Ryan. With his arms folded, he gazed at the door as if he anticipated my arrival. The back of my neck pricked with cold sweat. I wanted to turn around and go, but I refrained from doing so because my heart was beating more quickly than usual. The first person to approach was my mother. She gave me a smile. In a way, it wasn't the warm smile I was used to, but the kind of smile that said she was holding back something. "Claire," she said, her voice soft but strained. "I'm glad you're here. We really need to talk." I gave her a tight smile. "Yeah," I figured. "What's happening?" Ryan stood up, moving toward me with the same frustrated expression he'd worn before. "Look, Claire, I get it. You're upset. But this isn't how you fix things. You're holding on to something that doesn't matter." I bit back a laugh, but it came out as more of a scoff. "It matters to me. You all just assume I'll always put you first, don't you?" Ryan didn't answer right away. He seemed to weigh his words, then said, "You're making a huge mistake. You think this is easy for me?" I lost my temper. "You think I don't care about you? I do, but it's always been about you, about what you need, about your life. But when it comes to me, It's always been about what fits into your plans." There was a long silence after that. My mom looked torn, like she didn't know how to respond, but Ryan was the one who broke it. "Why does it always have to be this hard?" he inquired, his voice husky with passion. "Why can't we simply be a family again? Maybe because we've never been a family," I answered, my voice softer now. "Not really. Not the manner I've always needed." There was something in the way I said it that lingered in the air, thick and heavy. My parents exchanged stares, and I could see them analyzing my statements, trying to figure out what to do next. But just when I thought things may settle down, my mom took a step forward. "Please, Claire," she said, her voice begging. "We can resolve this. We can. We simply need you to make things right." I gave a head shake. "I'm very frustrated. Mom, it's not my responsibility to make it right. You must realize that I am no longer available to solve your difficulties. I've had enough of giving up everything for other people." But when I turned to go, I could hear her voice following me, huskier than before. "You are not alone in this." I paused. Even though the remarks hurt, I didn't back down. I was unable to. And I realized that I was truly prepared to sever the connection at that very time. I felt the weight of the years I'd spent, trying to fit into a position I didn't desire and to satisfy everyone. The moment I left the home, I became aware of something when the door behind me snapped shut. I felt genuinely free for the first time in my life. No more making adjustments all the time. Playing the peacekeeper is over. No more giving up my own interests to keep a family together that wasn't really supporting me. I didn't check the buzzing phone in my pocket. Rather, the first set out down the sidewalk, unsure of my particular destination but aware that I had to leave. Without my family's continual pressure, I needed time to clear my thoughts and establish my own way. That's when I noticed it. I looked at the home as I turned the corner. My home? The one about which they had always fantasized. The one that was unattainable for years. Every time they passed the mansion that had come to represent their entitlement, greed, and the one thing they believed I would never dare to take for myself, Ryan and my parents would swoon over it. I didn't regret it either. All they had said about it being only a house and a mistake, and how they believed I should be thankful for what little they had given me, came to mind. No more than an afterthought of some sort. I felt as though a tremendous burden had been removed from my shoulders because I had at last made my own decision. This home was more than simply a building. It was evidence that I was capable of making my own choices and that I would no longer allow them to control me. Calls, mails, and guilt trips from all sides filled the following several days. My mother persisted in calling, leaving left after voicemail, pleading with me to sell the house back and urging me to think again. My dad, who I assumed would support me, began messaging me to express his disappointment and how I was discarding everything. And Ryan wrote a few irate texts accusing me of wrecking everything. However, it all seemed far away, like if I were listening to them through a glass wall. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. However, they arrived at my door a week later, each and every one. Ryan, his fiancée, and my parents. I noticed them standing on my porch as I stood in the doorway, taking a deep breath before responding. My family was there, appearing to be preparing a final effort to coerce me into complying, trying to seem as though they still had control of the situation. They were all agitated. "We must speak." My mother spoke in the same begging voice she had previously used. I allowed them enter the home by stepping back and crossing my arms. But this time, I didn't feel guilty about anything. Only determination was present. Now that they had gone too far with me, it was my time to defend myself. "Take a seat." I spoke in a forceful yet composed tone. They all gave each other anxious looks before settling upon the couch, obviously anticipating my giving in. But I had changed as a person. It was simpler for me to give in, but I wasn't the little sister. The daughter who would say she was sorry for desiring something for herself was not me. "I understand why you are here." As I spoke, I glanced at each of them. "Furthermore, I will not sell it back." Ryan started to disagree, but I interrupted him by raising my hand. "I've heard every justification. It's only a home. It is not necessary for you. Guess what, though? Yes, I do. I had to have it for myself. For my own mental health, as well as all of you. You all didn't even consider my needs. You didn't even inquire." A long gap ensued as they conversed. Uncomfortable looks. I didn't care that I could see my dad's fury mounting. Making people happy wasn't the goal here. I was trying to defend myself here. Do you believe this has to do with the house? I went on, speaking steadily but firmly. This has to do with years of being ignored, of being the last person taken into account. You assumed I would always accept what you offered me? Okay, not anymore. I've prioritized you throughout my entire life, ensuring your happiness. I was also miserable. I've finished that. Ryan started to say something, but I interrupted him. I'm not going to back down, Ryan. It's not about you, your mother, or your father. It's about me. Take charge of my life at last. I could see that pained my mom since tears were streaming down her face. However, this was no longer about her emotions. I was the subject of this. Please, Claire, she muttered. We are related. We will resolve this. We usually do. Don't toss this all away, please. I'm not discarding anything. I stood up and answered. Simply said, I'm not discarding myself any longer. Additionally, I will not allow you to shame me into taking responsibility for your issues. I've always felt that I should have made the sacrifice because of you. However, I no longer know you that way. After that, there was a longer than I had anticipated silence. It was heavy, awkward, and full of unspoken words. For the first time, my parents were unsure of how to respond. They had anticipated that I would break down and apologize, but I didn't. At last, my father got to his feet. Claire, I don't understand you. You're not this person. No, father, I spoke aggressively. I've changed. I then proceeded to the door, opened it, and gave them one final glance. You may continue to call. You may continue texting. However, I'm not going to change my opinion. I made this choice. It's final too, without anticipating a reply. I closed the door behind myself. Suddenly, I was at liberty. The pressure, the guilt, the phone calls, everything vanished. I no longer had to defend my decisions. I felt valid without their approbation. For once, I felt at ease because I had made my own decision. The home was more than simply a physical structure. I was never going back since that was the first time I had ever really stood up for myself. It felt fantastic to be in charge again. Story 3. My name is Jake. I've worked in construction for the last 10 years, and I'm currently 29. It's not glitzy. I've established a nice life for myself, but it's hard work, but it pays the bills. I have a good place, a trustworthy truck, and a group of people that appreciate my work. However, there has always been conflict in my family, particularly with my sister Emma. I've always felt that I've been living in her shadow for the most of our lives, even though she's 5 years younger than me. She is praised by everyone for being a future doctor, making her the golden child. Without a doubt, she is smart. However, she has consistently felt better than me. Like my work isn't important enough to be respected, simply because it lacks a white-collar title and a degree. When Emma enrolled in medical school around 2 years ago, things really began to go south. Both my dad and I were overjoyed for her. I knew she would be pushing her ass for years to come, since medical school is no joke. I was surprised by how soon she began to rely on me financially rather than emotionally. Don't misunderstand me. Helping out relatives is nothing new to me. I've always made an effort to support them, particularly Emma. I'm the type of man who will jump at the chance to help, even if it means risking my life. However, things were beginning to seem a little unfair. It was little stuff at start. Hello, would you be able to provide a couple $100 this month for rent? I'm in a hard spot as the loans start to come in. I didn't hesitate. Emma is my sister. Soon, though, it was more than simply rent. Can you assist with this semester's tuition? I have no intention of taking out another loan. Medical supplies for her study came next. It was becoming more and more difficult to say no to each request that came up every time I turned around. She was consuming my funds as if they were nothing, even though I had worked hard and saved to get ahead. The guilt trip persisted. Jake, I'm sure you have the cash. It's not really necessary, is it? However, what transpired that Christmas was what truly got to me. Just before the holiday, I worked a 12-hour shift and was worn out and ready to collapse. Emma was hosting a large party at her house as usual. The entire extended family was coming over to celebrate, and Mom and Dad were present. Naturally, I accepted the invitation, but this year I wasn't feeling it. I decided to forgo it after the year of her incessant demands for money and her pressure to be there for her. I texted Emma to let her know that I would be spending this year at home to unwind. I apologize. I'm completely wiped out. I'll talk to you all again later, she answered quickly and incisively. Jake, you had best be there. Christmas is here. If you fail to show up, you cannot just leave because you are too exhausted. Never again should you bother to show up. In any case, you're only a construction worker. Do you need to do anything else? I was taken aback. For what seemed like an eternity, I gazed at that message. Read it again and again. Emma had made fun of my profession before, but this was the first time it truly got to me. My job has always made me proud. I've worked so hard to reach this point, and my own sister was making fun of me in this way because I wasn't a lawyer, doctor, or anything else she thought was deserving. I didn't text her back. Not even the family supper was attended by me. Rather, the first stayed at home and watched TV while experiencing the same knot in my gut. She had been impolite before, but this time was different. It was a personal matter. She had gone too far. My mother calls me a few days later. Jake, what took place? Now that Emma is unhappy, you're making things more dramatic. Simply attend her party. What's so important? We are related. I lost my temper. What's so important? The main issue is that Emma views me as merely a means of making ends meet. I'm not a bank mom, her brother is me. Mom let out a sigh. She lowered her voice. Jake, she's simply under a lot of stress because of medical school. She's having trouble, but you've always had a steady work. That's not how she means it. It seemed unbelievable to me. Mom, that's not how she means it. I don't matter to her. All that matters to her is what I can do for her. I decided I needed a break from everything the following week. I didn't pick up Emma's phone or text messages. After giving it a lot of thought, something inside of me exploded. I had had enough of being her ATM. I've had enough of her punching back. Because she had a degree and aspirations of becoming a doctor, she had always pretended to be superior to me. She was treating me like trash and I was sick of it. Then came the day that would alter everything the day she called me. 4 months or so had passed since Christmas. I had been living my life, keeping my distance. I didn't treat her rudely. I simply stopped playing her game. However, Emma's tone changed when she called. I truly need your assistance, Jake. I'm not sure what I'm going to do because I'm late on my rent. You're my only option. I paused. That old familiar guilt tugged at me, but I wasn't going to fall for it again. Not now. Not after everything she'd said. I apologize. Emma, I can't help you this time. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear her trying to process my refusal. Then she said, her voice trembling, What do you mean you can't help? You always help. You have to help. I'm going to fail out of med school if I can't pay this rent. Do you want it on your conscience? I inhaled deeply. Emma, you've never once thought about what's on my conscience. You've exploited me for your whole adult life, and I've had enough. You can figure it out on your own. That's when it occurred. The final straw. Emma started to scream. You selfish bastard! How could you do this to me after everything I've done for you? And you can't assist me? Fine, then don't bother showing up for Christmas next year or any other family occasion. In any case, you're only a construction worker. Even so, what have you got to offer? I wasn't prepared for how hard the words hit. However, they didn't have the same impact this time. I experienced something else in place of guilt. Something liberating. I felt as though a burden had been removed from my chest. I had had enough of her arrogant demeanor. I didn't respond. I realized I was done with the ongoing financial assistance as soon as I hung off the phone. I would no longer cover her medical school expenses. I wouldn't pay her rent or stand by and let her treat me like a second-class citizen. Things started to become extremely intriguing at that point. A week later, she gave me another call, but this time it was different. You could hear the anguish in her voice. Please, Jake. I said something I didn't mean. I apologize. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it, you know. Can we have a conversation? At this moment, I truly need you. I'll do anything. Just lend me a hand. It was too late, yet I could sense the change. My willingness to go above and above for her had changed. That's when the real retaliation began. For a minute, I sat there with my phone in my hand, listening to Emma's voice crackle with a mixture of terror and remorse. I didn't feel the need to drop everything to aid her for the first time in years. Rather, I had a sense of empowerment. I felt like I was finally in charge. I was suddenly the one dictating the terms after she had treated me for so long as though I was only helpful when I could provide financial assistance for her issues. However, I had no intention of making things easy for her. The fact that she finally acknowledged her mistake didn't mean that I would just forgive her. This was no time for peacemaking. It was a payback moment. I wasn't going to overlook the fact that she had crossed a line, so I gave her a bit more time to simmer. I took a while to reply. A few days later, she phoned again, but I didn't even answer. She apologized, begged, and promised to make it up to me in 2 texts. The vitriol she had previously hurled at me was quite different from what she said now. I could really sense their despair as she realized that her go-to strategies were no longer effective. I didn't care, though. I was no longer merely a man she could control since she had shown her true self to me. I had supper at my folks' place the next weekend. What transpired between Emma and myself was unknown to them. They simply assumed it was another sibling argument that will be resolved. I didn't even intend to mention it. Emma, however, froze when she spotted me seated at the dining table. She seemed to be seeing a ghost as she gazed at me. The problem was that I had changed as Jake. She was aware once. The one who would sacrifice everything for her. I was a new version of myself. Someone who didn't hesitate to assert himself. Acting as though nothing had occurred, she approached me with a tentative grin. "Jake, hello? How are you?" Only when she was attempting to control me did she inquire in a too charming tone. I didn't even blink, just stared her in the eye. "Emma, I've been good. What about you?" I spoke in a cool, collected tone. For a brief while, her smile wavered, but it soon returned. "Excellent. Yes. Simply stressed. Med school, you know, everything. Yes, I am aware of it." I leaned back in my chair and said that. "I am well aware of the strain and tension that accompany it. Not knowing who you can trust might be difficult." She blushed. The tiniest hint of shame was seen in her eyes. She wasn't prepared to acknowledge that she understood what I was saying. Mom spoke out from the opposite side of the table, unaware of the tension. "Are you two still fighting, Jake? What's happening?" "You've been so near all along." I pretended that it was just another quarrel in the family and shook my head. "We're all right, Mom." "I simply don't know. It's simply too much these days." Emma gave me a furious look, but I remained where I was. I had no intention of sympathizing with her. Later, as dinner was coming to an end, Emma made an effort to speak with me in private in the kitchen. This time, I could see she was attempting to approach me in a new way. She seemed to be treading very carefully. "Jake, can we have a brief conversation?" I sincerely apologize for what I said. "I'm aware that I shouldn't have hurt you." I leaned against the counter and just stared at her, crossed arms. "Emma, it has nothing to do with what you said. It has to do with the way you have treated me throughout my life. I've always been the guy who comes through for you when things get hard. Your personal bank is not me." I wasn't going to back down, but she winced. "I apologize." Her voice was quieter now as she said, "I don't mean to act like that. I didn't realize how much I was pushing you, but school has been causing me a lot of stress. I am aware that you have supported me, and I am grateful. I suppose I was at a loss for words." "Yes. Well, perhaps it's time you discovered the solution." "Because I'm done playing that game," I said bluntly. We were silent for a long time. She paused just as she appeared to be about to speak. Her throat caught as she spoke. I wasn't going to let her backpedal, even though I knew she was trying to take it all in. Not now. She left the conversation without saying anything more, but I could see that she was thinking about it. The guilt, the regret, and the knowledge that I would not be able to forgive her readily. She'd always relied on me to support her. However, the roles had now been reversed. The weeks that followed were rather hectic. Emma made another attempt to get in touch with me. She called me, texted me every day, and even once showed up at my place of employment. But I didn't back down. I was not going to allow her to guilt-trip me into feeling sorry for her, and I politely informed her each time that I would no longer be assisting her. She tried to manipulate me with sweet words, but I wasn't fooled anymore. I wasn't the guy who would let his family walk all over him. The more she begged, the more I realized how deep her entitlement ran, and that just made me more resolute in my decision to stop giving her anything. One day she called me again. This time her voice was desperate, but it wasn't the pleading that got to me. It was the tone, the genuine panic in her voice. "Jake, I can't do this. I'm going to fail. I've lost everything. I can't afford rent, and if I don't pay it, I'll get kicked out. I don't know where else to turn. Please. Please help me." I didn't say anything at first. I just let her talk. Let the silence between us grow heavy. And then when she finally paused to catch her breath, I spoke. "You know, Emma, the truth is, I think you need to learn something. You need to learn what it's like to face the consequences of your actions. You can't keep running to me every time things get tough." There was a long pause, and when she spoke again, I could hear the tears in her voice. "I get it. I've been awful. Please, Jake. I know I've messed up, but I don't know what to do without your help." And for the first time, I felt no sympathy. None. Just a cold sense of finality. "You'll figure it out," I said and hung up. The next day, I went online and posted a public message in our family group chat. I described everything. Every dime I had lent her, every time she'd taken advantage of me, and how much I had done for her. I wasn't doing it to disgrace her, but to make sure everyone knew the truth. That's when Emma's life truly started to disintegrate. But it was merely the beginning. The instant I clicked send on that message, I knew it would stir things up. I didn't expect things to escalate this rapidly, though. My phone buzzed almost instantly with alerts, but it wasn't the normal supportive family remarks I was used to seeing. It was a stream of texts from Emma calling me selfish, callous, and ungrateful for everything she had done for me in the past. I nearly laughed. She had a remarkable capacity to distort things to fit her story. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat back and watched the aftermath develop. Mom phoned first, and I could sense the stress in her voice. "Jake, what's going on? You posted it, but why? You are aware that your sister is already dealing with a lot of stress from medical school." "I understand, Mom, but I'm done with her using me as a safety net for so long. Especially when she treats me like an ATM, I'm not going to continue to give in to her." The person on the other end of the line paused for a while. "She is your sister, though." "Mom," she whispered in a tiny, almost beseeching voice. "She has no right to treat me this way, even if I am aware that she is my sister," I answered. "I will no longer be her fall guy." Mom let out a long sigh. "Jake, you're making a huge error. She is being harmed by you. She's experienced a lot." I was at a loss for words. Emma's treatment of me was all I could think about. The innumerable occasions when she would only visit when she was in need. To be a sister is never enough. To be honest, I didn't feel bad about it. No more. Then Dad arrived. Although his call was as stressful, he approached it differently. He tried to argue with me while remaining composed and meticulous. "I understand your frustration, Jake, but don't you feel like you're going too far? In our family, we don't do stuff like this." I have returned a sardonic chuckle. What the heck? I should just continue to be her ATM, continue helping her when she's too busy to solve problems on her own. Support is what family is all about. You two have always supported one another. Dad urged, "You can't just ignore her like this. I will not abandon her father. I just will not continue to condone her actions. She has to learn how to be independent." However, it wasn't only my parents who made contact. I began receiving texts asking me questions from my aunts, uncles, cousins, and other members of my extended family, claiming that I was mistaken, that I was being unforgiving. Some even claimed Emma had every right to seek assistance because she was under too much stress from medical school. It seemed unbelievable to me. All of these individuals who had never experienced Emma's treatment of me were now attempting to portray me as the bad guy. Nobody seemed to know what it was like to constantly be the one giving without ever receiving anything in return. Emma's answer followed. It was a lengthy text, filled with remorse and rage as well as a fervent request that I reconsider. She claimed she was unsure of how she would function without me. Her whole future depended on it. She pleaded with me to forgive her, saying that this time would be different. She even expressed regret for her previous remarks to me. It hurt more than I had admitted. After reading her message, I took a time to process what she had said. I had a glimpse of the previous Jake, the one who would have given in right away. Who would have stepped up to provide a helping hand? Who would have persuaded himself that family was the most important thing? Not this time, though. I was filled with resolution this time. Any semblance of pity was driven aside by the recollections of her self-centeredness and the numerous times she had taken advantage of me. That's when I came to a realization. I had been suppressing myself for years, telling myself that I couldn't be the villain. However, it could not have been about being the good man or the evil person. Perhaps it was about letting go of the guilt I had carried for so long and finally advocating for myself. I set my phone down without even trying to answer. I had already decided on something. I wasn't going to give Emma any more money. It was impossible for her to coerce me into returning to save her. She had to experience what it was like to be in charge of her own life. After several days without hearing from her, I finally received the anticipated phone call. I was browsing through some odd content on my phone in the late evening when I noticed her name appear on the screen. I didn't answer. Her voicemail was left. She spoke in a tight, trembling voice. "I understand now, Jake. I really apologize for how horrible I was to you. But don't leave me out here by myself, please. This is not something I can accomplish. There's no one else I can turn to. I just need another chance since I'm failing at everything. Please." I didn't flinch, but the words felt heavy. I was unable to. This sob tale was the exact one I had heard. I wasn't going to fall for it after seeing it a dozen times previously. Not now. Even though I knew it wouldn't make a difference, I left the voicemail there for a time. Then, on the morning after, an odd incident occurred. I didn't recognize the number that called me. I nearly ignored it, assuming it was just another telemarketer, but I chose to answer. "Hi there, Jake. It's the medical school's Dr. Hughes." The voice from the other end came. I went cold. "What's happening?" "Emma has been having a lot of difficulties recently. I'm worried. We're worried about her progress because she's been behind. To keep her on course, we were wondering if you may think about providing her with financial support. Without your help, she might lose her place in the program. She might not make it, I'm not sure." Despite a sudden surge of fury, I spoke in a steady tone. "I'm no longer assisting her. I told her that already." "Well," continued Dr. Hughes, "I wanted to be honest with you. Emma informed us that you have always been a huge source of support for her, and to be honest, we are concerned that if she doesn't receive the assistance she requires, she may not be able to keep up." The traditional guilt trip was there. The story of the impoverished, struggling student was presented in a way that attempted to hold me accountable for her shortcomings. I got to my feet, pacing the space. "I apologize, but I'm no longer her fallback. She must solve the problem. I'm finished." After I hung up, I experienced the recognizable feeling of closure. However, it felt different this time. I didn't feel the same acrid rage that used to overwhelm me when I'd had enough of Emma. More like a sense of relief. However, I received another call a few days later. It wasn't from Emma this time. It came from an attorney. When I briefly saw the name of the law business on the caller ID, I was incredulous. I nearly believed I had erred. It could have been a fraud. Or perhaps I was being played. However, no. I took the call. "Hi there, it's Jake. Thompson, Mr. I'm phoning on Emma's behalf." The attorney remarked in a kind yet businesslike tone. "She told me to get in touch with her about a financial arrangement. She thinks you owe her money." I nearly laughed as I blinked. "What? What are you discussing?" "According to her, you verbally committed to continuing to assist her with her medical school tuition and other financial needs. She believes that you are breaking an agreement now that you have stopped. You both had," she says. What I was hearing was unbelievable. "Are you serious? She will attempt to sue me for this." Although the lawyer's tone remained composed, there was a faint edge, as if he was attempting to maintain control. She might, however, explore other legal remedies. However, I wanted to make sure that we tried to settle things amicably before we took that approach. I couldn't decide whether to scream or laugh. I was completely stunned. What was Emma Willing prepared to do? The issue was weighing heavily on me, but I chose to face it head-on rather than give in. Something broke inside of me. "No," I spoke aggressively. "I'm finished. I will no longer support her lifestyle, and I will not allow her to use the legal system to control me. She has abused me for years. Let her attempt to sue me if she wants to. She won't get a dime, though. You may let her know that." The other end paused for a moment. "I understand," the lawyer said, "but you should be aware that this could escalate. I highly suggest that you think again. There were several possibilities available to me at that time. I had the option to fight it out in court. Instead of apologizing out of terror, I chose not to. I maintained my composure. I said, "I'll take my chances. If Emma wants to continue pressing me, you may let her know. She will just exacerbate the situation for herself." For the following few days, I hung up. I was left alone. Nothing, no texts, no calls. I assumed Emma had come to the realization that she could no longer intimidate me into paying for herself. I then received a letter in the mail about a week later. Emma sent it. A brief message in her distinctive handwriting was enclosed. "I was mistaken, Jake. I've taken you for granted and been self-centered. I believed I could coerce you into assisting me. However, I've finally come to the realization that I've ruined all of our relationships. I apologize for all of this. I no longer have any expectations of you. I have to do this myself. I do not wish to lose my brother, though." I gazed at the letter for a long time, feeling conflicted. I wanted to forgive her in part, wanted to act as though nothing had occurred and just brush everything under the rug. But something closer to satisfaction was felt by the other half of me, the one that had endured years of her taking advantage of me. At last, she was taking responsibility for her actions. However, it was too late and too little. I disposed of the letter in the garbage. After a few months, Emma miraculously made it through medical school. She didn't communicate with me very much, and to be honest, I didn't want to. It wasn't because of me that she appeared to be headed in the right direction now. She was left to fend for herself. And for the first time, I was pleased with her. The best aspect of it all, though, was that I was free, without the guilt. Free from the burden of needing to support her all the time, and the idea that I would be her safety net forever. I was no longer going to be her emotional target, and I was no longer her bank. The purpose of family was not to exploit one another. Supporting one another was important, not just when it was convenient. Despite her imperfections, Emma was finally realizing that the call had ceased. The drama subsided, and knowing that I was no longer her doormat gave me peace of mind for the first time in years. I never had to assist her again, and I never received another letter. And that was okay with me.